From Studio 119A, The Exit Interview with Matthew Silva.
As the school year is coming to a close and seniors prepare to begin their next chapter of life, I often think about the pressures they feel to have it all figured out by the age of 18. But the truth is, their future will be shaped by much more than where they go after high school. Whenever I speak with people established in their career, I'm reminded of how rarely life follows a linear path. Most journeys are full of detours, surprises, and unexpected turns, even when one lands exactly where they'd hoped to be. This show intends to highlight these stories. Tonight, for my inaugural episode, my guest is Mr. Henry Grishman, who has served as superintendent of the Jericho School District for almost 3 decades. With a career in education spanning over 50 years, Mr. Grishman has served as a teacher, principal, and superintendent in multiple districts across New York State. But it was here in Jericho that he built a legacy, not just as an administrator, but as a steward of excellence, equity, and innovation. Under his leadership, Jericho has led the way as one of the top performing school districts in the nation, not only in academics, but in cultivating a culture of kindness, curiosity, and shared purpose. As he approaches retirement, we take a moment not just to celebrate a distinguished career, but to understand the story that led to it. Mr. Grishman, welcome to the Exit Interview.
I am thrilled to be here.
So this is a little bit different than what we've done in the past, and the main genesis for this format is to kind of show people kind of how you got here. We know you've had a great career, and we want to know what kind of led up to it. So we're going to go way back to childhood, and I'm curious to know, when you were a kid, what were your dreams? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, again, you talk about childhood. You watch baseball and you say, "Wow, I want to be a professional baseball player." And then you watch the fire trucks coming down the street and you say, "Guess what? I want to be driving that fire truck." So I think that when you're young, the world is open and everything that you see, that's exciting. I think I want to do that. That's exciting. I think I want to do that. So again, my early recollections of elementary school, middle school is I wanted to be everything.
Did you go through that legitimately?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what kind of student were you though, as a kid?
Probably a varying student. I think at times I was a good student. At times I was distracted by sports. I want to go outside and play basketball. I want to be with my friends. So what time is it? What time can we be on the basketball court?
Did you necessarily see yourself as a superintendent? Did you know what a superintendent was?
I probably didn't know what a superintendent was. Probably had in middle school and high school, had a relationship with the building principal. Not necessarily for all the right reasons. And I'm sure at that point in time, I never saw myself sitting in a principal's office.
Were you a troublemaker?
I wouldn't say a troublemaker, but I did spend some time with the assistant principal and the principal. And actually, just a quick aside story. So I graduated from Lincoln High School. And 9 years later, finishing high school, 9 years later, after going to college and teaching, I returned to Yonkers as a building administrator. So that was my first job I think I was 26. And at the first meeting of all the new principals that were hired in the city of Yonkers, when the superintendent introduced me, said, here's our new principal of School 26 in Yonkers, Mr. Henry Grishman, my high school principal, who obviously I have not seen or spoken to in 9 years. And again, high school with 3,000 kids. He yelled out from the back of the room, "How's your mother?" I think her name was Rose. And "How's your father?" I think his name was Simon. So obviously we knew each other pretty well.
Yeah. So again, part of what I want to show with this format and with this kind of interview is how life is kind of mysterious. And as Steve Jobs famously said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backward.
Absolutely.
And when you're a kid, the world is open, and you kind of are thinking maybe about being a professional baseball player or a firefighter or something. And but kids are always told. We're all always told. You gotta prepare. You gotta do well in school. These sorts of things. And leading up to senior year, all the work that you're doing, all the efforts looking at schools and that sort of thing, there can be a lot of pressure on kids to have it all figured out, and a lot of them really feel like they have to have every where they're going to go to college is going to determine everything about the future, their future. So for you, when you were going through, say, middle school and high school, did that become clearer, or like what were the options looking like as you were approaching the end of high school, and what did that look like?
So for me, what it looked like, I had two older sisters. One of my older sisters who had a great impact on me was, Hank, sit tight, enjoy the world, go into college and explore, take courses all over the place and explore your options. My other sister was a very excellent student and very focused, and she knew the path she was taking. And she conversely said, Hank, you really have to have a better idea of what you want your major to be and what path you want to take. So again, two conflicting advisors sending me off to college.
But did you see education in your future as a high school kid? Was that like...
Absolutely not. I mean, at that point, I think I actually went into college with a notion of, I want to explore. I want to, what are the options that are out there? In the back of my mind, I worked in day camps and sleepaway camps. I knew that I enjoyed working with kids, with younger kids, middle school age kids, but I never did a connect the dot in terms of, will my enjoyment of working with kids lead to a profession? I probably at some point had thought about, is a pediatrician a possibility because I enjoy working with kids? Is that something that might be in my future? Maybe.
So you basically entered school with a wide open liberal arts kind of a...
My diploma says general arts and science.
Where'd you go to college?
Penn State.
Nice. Hey.
Yeah.
And so you go to Penn State. Did you do just 4 years there? Did you wind up moving around at all? How did that?
Four straight years.
So you graduate from college now with your degree. Then what?
and again, I think through college, I probably started to explore. Maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to do that. But I really had no set direction. I had, again, people who were giving me advice. You really should be thinking about this. You really should be thinking about that. You should be thinking about graduate school.
Plastics.
Plastics in that time, that was the number one. Plastics, I should have invested.
But seriously, you graduate from college even, and you really don't have like a clear path.
At that point,
you're 22?
Yeah, 21, 22.
And you have this degree from Penn State, but so what'd you do? Like odd jobs? How did you find your first like real paycheck?
So as I'm graduating, my dad, who's in business in New York City, said, "Come work for me for a couple of years." People advising, well, maybe you want to do some graduate work. Maybe you want to look at a postgraduate degree. Both of my sisters at that point were teachers. And both
were they local still?
They were local. Like I again graduated from Yonkers. Both of them were teachers. One an elementary teacher, one a high school teacher in Rockland County. And they said, why don't you? We've seen you your whole life. Enjoy being around kids. So for a year or two, why don't you think about teaching? I said, it's something maybe that I'll try for a year or two or three. During the late '60s. There definitely was a tremendous need for teachers. I had not taken any education courses, and I was not certified as a teacher. But again, in the late '60s, there was a tremendous need to fill the teacher ranks. Salaries were not good, so there were a lot of openings. So I applied in 3 different districts to be a teacher and was hired in all 3 districts. And I said, guess what? Okay, I'm going to pick one of them, and let me see from there what develops. And maybe I'll do this for, again, my thought, let me see how this feels. I'm going to do this for a year or two. And then at that point, I'm really going to decide graduate school with what kind of focus. And I really went into it not expecting it to be a career.
And getting a gig was a little different than today's standards.
It was again, my longest interview was a half an hour. And had three job interviews. Yeah. I was offered a job in the DOE in New York City. I was offered a job in Yonkers, city of Yonkers, where I had just graduated from, and I was offered a job in Rockland County, where both of my sisters currently worked.
And what was your first position then?
My first position was teaching 5th grade in Haverstraw Elementary School, which was an interesting Rockland County school. Again, the school, North Rockland, was a large school district that served a suburban population and a immigrant population. There was brick factories along the Hudson River, and the Haverstraw was the town that supported the brick factories. And again, many of the kids and families that served that part of the school district were from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico.
All right, and so you're working as an elementary school teacher. At what point did you realize I want to go into administration? I want to go in a different, because I'm sure there were many different steps getting you there. And what did that look like, and where did that take you around the state too?
So again, I think as I started to teach, I said, I like this. This is pretty good. So I needed to get certified. So I started to take graduate courses in education to get certified, which maintained my ability to teach. So for 2 years I taught 5th grade. And then I moved up I said I want to be with little older kids. So I moved up to the middle school and taught middle school math for 2 years as well. And that's when I started to really focus on, I'm really liking this a lot. And I think one of the offshoot realizations was I want to have more input on more kids. How can that happen? Well, if you look toward administration, that could very well happen. So after I finished teaching 4 years, I enrolled at NYU in their doctorate program in administration. In those days, you had to take a year off to do that. So my wife was teaching. She supported us while I went to graduate school at NYU. And again, an incredible turn of events. While I was in graduate school, I spent some time consulting in the city of Yonkers, where I had graduated high school, and worked there through NYU, maybe 2 days a week. And sometime in the spring, I was approached by the superintendent in Yonkers and said, would you be at all interested in an administrative position next year? So at age 26, I was offered a principalship in the city of Yonkers.
Oh, wow. All right, so now you're principal. You eventually wind up getting a gig as a superintendent, not of Jericho, the Jericho School District. How many other positions?
So I was an elementary principal for 3 years. I was a middle school principal for 3 years in a different district. And again, that's, I think, as I saw, I like having impact on a broader scale. I like impacting not just individual kids, but broad scale in terms of, and again, you talk about, academic successes, academic improvement, but the need for what's the climate like, and what kind of impact can you have on the climate in your classroom? What impact can you have on the climate in a full building? What kind of impact can you have on the climate in a full district? Right. So I think at that point I started to see, I want to be a superintendent of schools. And in 1978, I applied for a superintendency in Schoharie County, New York, which is a dairy farming community, and a really interesting experience. 600 kids, K-12, in one building. Wow. In one building. The transportation department was 5 buses. So in terms of scale, it was almost like a principalship with a little more responsibility. I wound up applying, being interviewed, and getting that job. And I still look back at that experience because, it wasn't just the superintendency. You were part, because it was a small community, you were part of the community. Yeah. Everybody on Sunday morning went to the firehouse for the pancake breakfast. Every other Friday night went to the Methodist church for the chicken barbecue.
Did you ever consider politics? Because I imagine that being a superintendent is kind of like being a politician.
There are political.
Did you ever consider that?
Again, that crossed my mind some. But again, I think from early on, I enjoyed being an educator. Yeah. I enjoyed being a teacher, and I missed part of that. I enjoyed being a building principal, and I missed part of that. And then I appreciated the bigger and broader role of being a superintendent. And again, that first start of a superintendency, where I really saw that you can have impact on the culture of an organization.
Yeah.
that's what sold me on, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I'm going to do this until I'm 55 and retire.
So tell me about how you got started here at Jericho.
So it's an interesting story. I had been a superintendent in Schenectady County, in a 4,000 kid district between Albany and Schenectady, a suburban district. I had been there for about 5 years. And a person I knew at SUNY Buffalo said, Hank, I know that you have roots on Long Island. I know your wife has roots on Long Island. The Plainview Old Bethpage superintendency is open. Would you be at all interested? So this was in 1992, the summer of 1992. I said, sure, I'd be interested in applying for that job. So I applied for the job in Plainview, and I was hired and started. We moved from Schenectady to Old Bethpage, and I became the superintendent in Plainview Old Bethpage in July of 1992. While I was there, after I had been there about 3 years, and I had just actually signed a new contract that summer to stay on for my next contract period, I got a phone call from the superintendent in Jericho, Dr. Mannheimer, who was my predecessor. He said, Hank, what's your interest in coming to Jericho? I said, tell me what's going on. He said, well, we just had a superintendent search, and we interviewed 15 people. We narrowed it down to 5 people. We narrowed it down to 3 people. And then the board decided that they really weren't comfortable with the candidates they had interviewed. So they asked me to tap several local superintendents who had decent reputations to come and apply at Jericho. So in the summer of 1995, I, along with 3 or 4 other Nassau County superintendents, met with the Jericho Board of Education. And after we spent 3 or 4 meetings, they offered me the job to become the superintendent in Jericho. And what's interesting about that is, again, it came out of left field. It was nothing I applied for or looked toward, but hearing Jericho, obviously I'm interested and I want to come work here. When I met with the board, they said, where do you see yourself? How long will you be here? We have a history of superintendents staying here a long time. What's your thoughts? I said, well, I've never been any place more than 5 years. And frankly, I get a little itchy after I'm someplace 5 years. So the chances are I probably will not be here in year 6. That was 30 years ago.
Yeah. Are you the longest serving?
So right now, I am the longest serving superintendent in the history of New York State, because I've not only been here 30 years, I'm now in my 47th year.
Wow.
As a superintendent of schools.
Wow. Oh man, that's crazy.
That is, when I look at that and say, if I'm only 47 years old, how could I have been superintendent for 47 years?
So, I mean, going back to my first question, again, I'm sure there's rarely a 10-year-old who's going, one day I want to grow up and be superintendent of schools, But the path there is really interesting and certainly brought upon by a lot of hard work and dedication. It's just interesting to see somebody's path, and also I find it interesting that you didn't necessarily consider even education through your college years.
Correct.
I mean, that's interesting.
The highlight in terms of, so what were you thinking when you were 12? What were you thinking when you were 18?
Yeah.
What were you thinking when you were in college? It's such an important piece for kids to hear.
Yeah.
You don't have to have that path determined
Exactly.
when you're 12.
Yeah. Sort of sidebar thing,
Yeah.
unrelated. Did you travel a bit? Did you travel around the country? Did you travel around the world at all?
I did through college. I spent many summers working in camps, day camp, sleepaway camp. But I also did a fair amount of let's get in the car and over break drive to Phoenix, or let's drive to Miami Beach. Spent 2 summers traveling in Europe. So again, the fair amount of traveling, and again, kind of growing up and making some decisions in terms of life's choices.
Yeah. Well, as they say, the rest is history, right? Or as Paul Harvey would have said, now you know the rest of the story. So, Mr. Grishman, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and for your extraordinary contributions to education and the lasting impact that you've made on this community.
Thank you.
I really do mean that sincerely. You've done a service to your community and to this school district, and congratulations on a remarkable career.
Thank you. You know how much I love the Jericho School District.
Yeah.
And it's so meaningful to me to be able to sit here and say, I've been here for 30 years, and I've loved every minute of being here. It is a special, the community is a special community, but even more so than that, the culture of the school district. If you work here, you understand that if you are part of the Jericho School District, you're part of the Jericho family. And again, people will ask, well, what's the secret sauce in Jericho? What makes Jericho so special? I think it is about the Jericho family. The staff is incredibly supportive of one another, and because they're so supportive of one another, they're able to give so much to our students, and our students are part of that family as well. And I really think that that's part of the secret sauce, and that's part of what has kept me here, looking forward on every Sunday night, looking forward to coming to work Monday morning.
That's awesome. Well, again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
The exit interview is inspired by two legendary voices from the golden age of broadcast, Charlie Rose and Paul Harvey. Charlie Rose was known for his deep, thoughtful interviews that felt more like conversations than performance. While his career ended in controversy, his long-form interview style, unhurried, curious, and intimate, left a mark on the long-form interview we see in many podcasts today. Paul Harvey, on the other hand, was one of America's most beloved radio voices. For almost 3/4 of a century, he shared the news of the day with millions, but it was his short, surprising human interest stories, each ending with a twist and the line, and now you know the rest of the story, that made him a legend. This show carries a little bit of both, the deep listening of Rose and the storytelling of Harvey. We hope to bring this spirit for storytelling into a new space for a new generation. With the set and style, you've probably noticed the influence of Rose, at least for our older viewers. As for Paul Harvey, well, you may not be as familiar with him, and I highly recommend going on YouTube and checking out some of his short stories. When I was a young boy growing up in Stony Brook, Long Island, my father commuted to work to Greenpoint, Queens, and often returned home late in the evening. On those long drives, he listened to the rest of the story by Paul Harvey on the radio. Arriving just in time to tuck us in, he would put us to sleep with those quirky little tales. These were our bedtime stories. The stories were short, about 3 minutes long, and always revolved around the hidden backstory of something or someone famous, like Princess Diana or the invention of Velcro. But Paul Harvey never revealed who or what the story was really about until the very end. And once he did, it all clicked into place. You suddenly knew exactly what he was talking about. You knew the rest of the story. They went something like this. And now the rest of the story. He was 3 years old when it happened. His father, a police officer serving his community on the night of December 18, 1921. He would never come home, shot and killed in the line of duty. The case was closed, but the wound it left never quite healed. Not for his mother, not for her quiet, observant son. The boy grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He wasn't the class clown, he wasn't the star quarterback, but he had something, a voice, and a way of using it that made people stop and listen. One day in high school, a teacher heard that voice. Isabel Ronan. She was impressed. So impressed, she sent him to the local Tulsa radio station KVOO. He was just 14. He started small, sweeping the floors, then reading the farm report, then commercials. Radio got into his bones. He studied it in college, refined it in the military, and lived it every day thereafter. He would simply speak into a microphone, and for almost 70 years, his voice echoed through kitchens, barbershops, barns, and back seats. Presidents listened, soldiers listened, farmers, nurses, truckers. America listened. He spoke of quiet heroes, small-town miracles, and the goodness of ordinary people. That voice became one of the most recognized and most trusted in American life. But the man behind it, the one who overcame tragedy, who found his calling behind a microphone at 14, who broadcasted into his 90s, never stopped believing that words, spoken well, could shape the world. And that unmistakable rhythm, that Midwestern sincerity, that unforgettable sign-off, that boy's name was Paul Harvey. And now you know the rest of the story.